Despite delays and security issues in North Kivu province in the restive eastern end of the Democratic Republic of Congo, voters turned out in their droves to cast their ballots. For most of them, the only issue that mattered was security. CGTN's Enoxikolia has their stories.
Esther Bahati has just cast her vote, and she's full of hope that it can make a difference and spark a new era for the country. She lives in a camp for the internally displaced persons in Nyarigongo, North Kivu province. For years, conflict has persisted in eastern Congo, marked by ongoing hostilities between rebel factions and government forces.
I came here when rebels attacked us and ran for this place. Life has been tough living in such tents. We were rained on. Some sleep in churches and schools.
She is among millions of Congolese who voted on Wednesday. When polling stations opened at 6 a.m., there were already queues forming across North Kivu province. They waited patiently despite authorities failing to deliver ballot materials on time. In choosing who to vote for, they want anyone who can bring peace to the region and improve their standard of living.
We are living a bad life. Our children are not sleeping in a good place, and we don't have food.
Some were frustrated by the fact that they could not vote. Two territories of North Kivu, Masisi and Ruchuru, which have been particularly affected by violence, did not open polling centers.
I am not happy. I really wanted to vote. Our home is in Masisi and we are not participating in the vote.
For the people displaced by conflict, these elections mean a whole lot. They are frustrated by life in camps. They want change. They want to go back home.
I have voted with the hope that we will get peace and we will be able to go back home and rebuild our lives.
It is estimated that 6.9 million people have fled their homes here in eastern Congo. Some of them are here. They have come to vote. They say they want a new beginning. Insecurity is a big issue in eastern Congo. For nearly a year now, conflict has persisted in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. Rebel factions like M23, the Allied Democratic Forces ADF and Codeco have continued to attack civilians and military objectives. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Goma, DRC.
Now, this, of course, as we mentioned at the start of the bulletin, is a deeply consequential election in an important country in Africa. Let's bring you up to speed with the latest developments in the vote in the DRC today. Chris Ochambringa is in Kinshasa in the western end of the country. Enoxikolia is all the way out in Goma, some 2,700 kilometers away in the eastern end of the DRC. Chris, let me start with you. Can you give us a sense of what the voter turnout and the voting process was like where you are?
Yeah, so Rama, the elections in where I am at Antenne de la Gombe in Kinshasa were marred by delays in delivery of the voting materials in many of this area. This is a huge center that has many polling stations. Many people here came very early to vote, but then they had to wait for more than 3 hours. We've been told that the situation was worse in other areas around the city. People had to wait for about 7 hours. So there is a statement that has been issued by the Electoral Commission saying that they are going to extend the voting so that all the people who are not able to cast their votes before the close of the polls at 5 p.m. Kinshasa time are able to vote. We're waiting for a final communique by the Electoral Commission about how long that extension will be. But later in the day, there were people who turned up in large numbers in this area. Hundreds of people. We haven't got the exact number, but many people are eager to see, some change in this country. And so they turned up in really large numbers to vote for their new president and MPs. Rama?
Indeed, 44 million citizens are eligible to cast their ballot in this particular election. And coming to you, you're in Goma, the eastern end of the DRC. What's the voting process been like there, considering how restive that part of the country is?
I would say the process wasn't smooth, but the people were calm. To elaborate on that is that we saw a lot of delay with the authorities, and that's the Electoral Commission failing to deliver the ballot materials on time. Many stations that we went to, as far as 9 a.m., there weren't materials for people to vote, but they remained calm in most parts of Goma and Nyiragongo, when all stretched in North Kivu. People remained calm throughout the exercise, and even and despite the Electoral Commission and the authorities failing to do their job early, the people remain calm. And in most stations, we will see that voting started at around 9 a.m. and many people came in, and quite a number of the people we talked to were very alerted. They wanted to have to cast the ballot, and in most of the stations we went to, the turnout was very good because we could see many people in the stations, and when we talked to members of the Electoral Commission, they said that it is not what they expected. They didn't expect many people to turn up, but they did. And remember, there are stations where people did not vote because of the insecurity issue we talked about.
Indeed, and we'll get back to that insecurity in a moment. But Chris, the DRC's economy, right? Massive exporter of minerals, copper, cobalt, uranium, diamonds, you name it. It's had a very rough year, though, in 2023. Inflation was over 23% at one point in July. How are these economic concerns influencing how voters then act at the polls?
The economy in the DRC has been a major issue in this election this year. Throughout the campaigns, the voters have been urging the presidential candidates to deal with this problem that has been going on for a very long time. See, the DRC, like you mentioned, is endowed with a lot of minerals. Some of these minerals are critical for the shift from the use of fossil fuels to clean technologies, clean energy. But millions of Congolese people have been living in poverty. Here in the DRC, it's known as scandale géologique, which means a geological scandal in French. People are really concerned that their country has all these minerals, but people have been living in poverty. And one of the main reasons for that is the corruption that has plagued this country for decades. The political class, people in the political class have this notion that when they get into power, it is their time to amass as much wealth as possible within the 5 years that they will be in office. And so they have been urging the government, to deal with this problem so that the economy can be, improve and change, ultimately trickle down to the lives of the ordinary people. Some of the leading candidates have made that a big campaign issue. They have promised to deal with this issue by starting out to invite investors who can come up and set up manufacturing plants in the DRC so that they can transform these raw materials, these minerals in the DRC, into finished products so that they create jobs and get more money for people. They have also talked about diversifying the economy, going into agriculture and other sectors so that they can create jobs. But you see, all these issues are linked to the security situation. Investors do not come to places that have a lot of conflict and corruption and a weak justice system. So the DRC is grappling with very many issues at the same time, but we're waiting to see whether the next president will deal with these issues so that investors can start coming here and improve the lives of the ordinary people. Rama?
Indeed, we can draw pretty much a direct line between the cobalt that ends up in the batteries in a lot of electric cars and the elections that are taking place in the DRC. I want to wrap up with you, Enoch. Security concerns. You essentially went over this in some detail in your story in the East, but you've got peacekeepers from the East African community pulling out of the region. MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping unit, it's been in the country for years and years and years. It's an unwelcome guest now in the eyes of the government and the citizens. So what is the plan to pacify the region?
So when you look at it, is that at the end of the regional forces pulling out of of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the eastern region, the mandate was not extended. But the transition process now takes long, which will end on the 7th of January around there. So what happens is that as the regional forces from the East Africa community pulls out, they will be replaced by those from SADC. That is the Southern African Development Community. So the forces from SADC will come in and replace the regional forces from East Africa community. So one community is replacing the other community. Remember, those forces from the East Africa were accused of not being very effective. They did not meet what the Kinshasa government expected, but the forces maintained that they were doing their job, which was just keeping peace and not engage in fire exchanges. So what is happening is we are going to see a number of SADC officers come in to replace and fill the void that will be left by the regional forces from the East Africa community. But also we have seen the Kinshasa government reinforce the government troops, that is the local troops here in Goma. For example, today we saw quite a heavy deployment of security forces, not just in polling centers, but also on the streets of Goma, just to ensure that there is peace during this electioneering process. Along the roads, we saw quite a number of security forces patrolling, not just in town, but even in villages. For example, in Nyarigongo, we saw quite a number of police, heavy deployment of not just police officers, but also army officers moving around just to ensure that things go right during this period. So what we wait to see is at what point will SADC officers come in full strength to replace the regional forces from the East Africa community.